Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another edition of Budget Magic. So today we're heading to Standard for a deck I'm really excited about. This is a mono-white control deck that I'm calling Mono-White Angels, because it plays a ton of angels. And I think this deck is pretty sweet. As you can see, 99 bucks in the paper world, 41 ticks on Magic Online. So pretty cheap for a competitive Standard deck. A quick reminder before we break it down, if you enjoy Budget Magic and the other video content we have here on MTG Goldfish, take a minute, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. All that stuff is really helpful and a great way to support the site. Anyway, let's talk Mono-White Angels. So Mono-White Angels is a deck that I built for a very specific reason. I was looking over the Standard metagame and thinking, how do I beat the three big decks in the format? So if you don't keep up on the metagame, right now there are three decks that really matter in Standard. Green-white tokens, mono-white or now white-red humans, and Bant Collected Company humans. Those decks, actually, those three make up almost 50% of the Standard metagame. Those are by far the most played, most popular decks. And if you think about those decks, they have a couple of things in common. They are all looking to go wide, and they all are battling primarily on the ground. So I thought, I want to beat a deck that has good matchups against green-white tokens, Bant humans, and to some extent white weenie. If I could build a deck that beats all three of those decks, this should be a really good deck. So Mono-White Angels is an attempt to build a deck that is designed to fight against those three decks that are making up half of the Standard metagame. So let's talk about the choices in the deck. First off, we have our Angels. So I mentioned all the big decks in Standard are doing their battling on the ground. So the idea with these Angels is they can fly over the top of what our opponent's doing and close out the game really fast after we've stabilized. Archangel of Ties in Linvala have the added benefit of having 5 toughness, so they don't die to Chandra, they don't die to Languish. Archangel of Ties also has a really good ability. Like against green-white tokens, one of the things they want to do is make a bunch of tokens from Nissa and from Gideon, go really wide. Well, Archangel makes that plan a lot harder because our opponent has to pay 1 every time they want to attack us for every creature that they want to attack with. So the idea that they just make a bunch of tokens and then attack becomes hard for them to actually pull off. They're going to have to give up the opportunity to do anything else on their turn if they want to attack with a bunch of 1/1s and 2/2s. Linvala is our get back in the game card. It's legendary, so we only have 2 of them, but when we are behind on the battlefield, it gains us 5 life, gets us out of the danger zone of dying, and it gets that 3/3 angel. So we end up with 8 power and toughness across 2 bodies in the air, usually good enough to close out the game in a couple of swings. And Amiri Shepherd probably looks a little strange, but it's actually really sweet in our deck. We have a lot of planes, 17 planes in our deck. We use this as our very late game. We play Amiri Shepherd, we hold it until we can make a land drop in the same turn, immediately play a land, get back another one of our angels, get back an eldrazi displacer maybe to protect our angels. So it's really powerful when we get to reanimate something for free. So our deck is pretty expensive, which means we need ways to ramp into things. Since we're mono-white, our options are pretty limited, but we have Knight of the White Orchid. If we're behind in lands when it enters the battlefield, we get an additional untapped planes, which is pretty nice. Hedron Crawler is a way to add some mana. I mentioned a minute ago we have eldrazi displacer, so it makes colorless mana for our eldrazi displacer, but basically it helps ramp us into our angels. And then Hedron Archive is only a 1 of. The reason I did put 1 in the deck though is the biggest downside of playing mono-white control is we're just very lacking in card advantage. We don't have the card draw that you have in black or in blue or even in green. We just don't have good ways of generating card advantage. So we make a bunch of mana in Hedron Archive. In the worst case, after it helps us ramp, we can catch it in for a couple cards, and it is a form of card advantage. Plus, it's a permanent, so in the late game, we can repeatedly sack it, draw cards, get it back with the Amiri Shepherd by playing probably a plains that we drew off of the Hedron Archive. So it becomes kind of a draw 2 for 2 every turn in the late game with Amiri Shepherd. Then we have another card advantage package. We really had to go deep to figure out ways to generate card advantage in this deck. So we have Eldrazi Displacer, Thraben Inspector, 1-drop, makes a clue token. So the basic idea is we can flicker the Thraben Inspector, keep getting those clue tokens. Not a very efficient form of card advantage, but Eldrazi Displacer is good in our deck anyway. And so is Thraben Inspector, just as a chump blocker that helps us get to the late game. But Eldrazi Displacer can also protect our angels. If our opponent's going to Declaration in Stone to kill our Emiria Shepherd, we can blink it with Eldrazi Displacer, keep it alive. It also has some cool synergy with like Knight of the White Orchid to potentially get more planes out of our deck. So it's just a really strong card in a white deck. And since we're mono white, it's easy to play enough colorless sources to support it. Then we get to the cards that are in the deck because they seem so incredibly good against the best decks in the format. So Hallowed Moonlight, I have thought for a long time, I want to build a deck that plays 4 Hallowed Moonlight in the main deck. And this is the deck. So this card just wrecks Collected Company. It wrecks green-white tokens and Secure the Waste, and even just fizzling Planeswalker make a token activations. It is just so good against a huge part of the meta right now. And in matchups where it's not good, it cycles for 2 mana, so what are we really losing by playing Hallowed Moonlight? It's a little inefficient in those matchups because we got to pay the 2 mana, but it's completely fine. It's like Shadow of a Doubt in Modern, which in some matchups doesn't do anything, but you can always cycle it for 2 mana, so it's never truly bad. Plus, we get some sweet synergy. The combination of Hallowed Moonlight and Eldrazi Displacer basically allows us to kill 1, 2, 3, depending on how much mana we have, creatures of our opponents with just Eldrazi Displacer. So we Hallowed Moonlight, so whenever a creature would enter the battlefield, if it wasn't cast, it gets exiled instead. And then Eldrazi Displacer basically takes a creature off the battlefield, makes it enter the battlefield again, but it wasn't cast, so it goes to exile. So in matchups where it's not good, Hallowed Moonlight, take Eldrazi for example, this is a way to permanently kill World Breakers and Atarkas and Ulamogs. So even in the bad matchups, thanks to Eldrazi Displacer, Hallowed Moonlight is still pretty sweet, and the synergy is really cool. Then the rest of the deck, we have Tragic Arrogance, which also just seems so good against the top decks in the format. It wrecks White Weenie, it wrecks Bant Humans, it wrecks green-white tokens, just so good against those decks, especially in conjunction with Pacifism. So when I started off this deck, I was like, I should probably play Silk Wraps, and then I thought about it, and I said, no, actually what we want is Pacifism. So the combo here is Tragic Arrogance. Basically, you choose for each player a Planeswalker, an Artifact, an Enchantment, and a creature. They keep those, and then sack the rest of their permanents. Well, when we pacify a creature, what we end up doing is choosing the pacified creature as the creature that stays around on the battlefield, and then choosing the pacifism as our enchantment that sticks around, so our opponent loses all of their creatures and a bunch of their other stuff potentially, and we get to keep around a threat. That's also the reason why we only have 1 Stasis Snare and 1 Quarantine Field. Because of the anti-synergy with Tragic Arrogance, we don't want to be in a position where, oh, we have a bunch of things under multiple Quarantine Fields and Stasis Snares and have to sack them to our Tragic Arrogance. The 1 Stasis Snare is to deal with things at instant speed, essentially. That's one of the downsides of Pacifism, is its sorcery speed. And then the 1 Quarantine Field is primarily to deal with Planeswalkers, which Pacifism and Stasis Snare are just can't do. Mana base wise, 17 planes, as I mentioned, 4 Battlefield Forge, just so we have colorless mana for Displacer. That's the only reason it's in the deck over planes. It's a white source. Because we have like Knight of the White Orchid and triple white and Archangel of Ties, we can't afford too many true colorless sources. So we wanted a land that could tap for white and tap for colorless, and Battlefield Forge was the cheapest one, I think, that fit that criteria. And then Majoring Network is another way of ramping, and it also makes colorless mana for our Displacer, but it's just a way we can store up mana to get to our Emiria Shepherds and things like that. In the sideboard, we have a bunch of options against aggro decks. So Cleric of the Forward Order helps gain us some life, works really well with Displacer because we can blink it, helps us stay alive. Emulating Glare kills an attacking creature outright. So one of the things our deck does not like is Tireless Tracker, because Pacifism lets it sit out on the battlefield and keep generating clues, but Emulating Glare is a way where we can actually kill the creature dead, like a Tireless Tracker, and not do it with an enchantment that's going to sit around and get wrecked by our tragic arrogance. Quarantine Field and Stasis Snare. If we're in a Planeswalker heavy matchup, we can bring in more Quarantine Fields. If we're in a matchup where instant speed removal really matters, or in a matchup where we don't have to worry about Dramoka's commands or sideboarding out tragic arrogance for some reason, then we can bring in more Stasis Snares. Then we have a couple of Felidar Cubs to deal with enchantments. Orbs of Warding is a little help against burn spells, a way to like slow down the game and keep us alive. Tamiyo's Journal is another really slow attempt at card advantage in control matchups. In those matchups, hopefully we can cast it and just let it sit on the battlefield and draw us extra cards. And then Descend Upon the Sinful is pretty sweet, and it makes an angel, so it fits the theme of the deck, but it exiles all creatures, which is really relevant against a lot of eldrazi. Anyway, that is Mono White Angels for Standard. I think the deck is pretty sweet. I'm definitely excited about it. It gets to play a lot of cool cards, has a lot of really cool synergies, like, oh, blink our Knight of the White Orchid with Displacer to get a plains to activate our Emiria Shepherd and reanimate something, or the cool like Hallowed Moonlight Displacer loop with Mage Ring Network to make a bunch of mana so we can wrath our opponent's board by blinking all their stuff and it doesn't come back. So there's a lot of cool things going on with it. I like that it attacks in the air. I love that it gets to play 4 main deck Hallowed Moonlights and 4 main deck Tragic Arrogance, cards that just seem so good in our standard format right now. So I'm excited to play it and check it out. I think it's going to be sweet. Anyway, thank you very much for watching our Mono White Angels Budget Magic. I hope you enjoy the videos, and I will talk to you soon.